The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
It was an up and down weekend for the New York Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
So, Gavin, you and I were talking before the show, and I think we came out of this weekend with vastly different opinions of how to feel. So two very different games. Embarrassing loss for the Knicks on Friday. Again, 126-101 to OKC. But it probably shouldn't have even been that close. I mean, they got ran off the floor. As bad as the game was the previous Friday, it was that much worse because it was at the Garden. It felt like the Knicks should have counterpunched, and yet they just kind of laid on the mat. And it really was enough to make you question this team's mettle. But then Sunday, they come back and win 140-106 over the Bucks. I mean, Jalen Brunson returned to form. Little injury scare that we'll get into later. About that came up late in the game, but in general, a bounce back game for him, bounce back game for Towns for sure. Josh Hart had a good game. I mean, the other two wings still maybe a little shaky, but definitely cause for optimism against a team that maybe isn't a contender so much anymore, but is at least competent and good. Even though the way that Doc Rivers game plans against Jalen Brunson maybe isn't, but I don't know. How did you come out of this weekend feeling on the aggregate here?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? Because I almost regret that we didn't torture ourselves on Friday and just get out 35 minutes of vitriol after that Thunder game. Because I mean, one, there's something fun about that. We got to do it against the Magic, right? And we both had a good time, I think. Or at least at the very least, it was cathartic. And now I'm confused. And when you're angry, sometimes you don't want to feel confusion, right? You want to feel pure, unadulterated anger and just be a little self-righteous in it. And the Knicks robbed me of that with frankly outside of Mikal Bridges, who was again awful, and maybe that's my takeaway from the weekend. They kind of robbed me of that clarity because they were really good in that Milwaukee game, and I have a feeling we're going to come down closer to the middle than we think on this, but I do think the Thunder game is the more telling of the two to me, just because of the trajectory, right? Because the first three quarters against Oklahoma City, we said it after that game, but I think that was about as encouraging basketball as the Knicks have played all year. I think Ian Begley had the stat coming out of the Oklahoma City game, but this Knicks team has not beaten a team with a better record than their current record this entire season. 0-5 with team that 0-5, against teams with a better overall record than them. 9-11 against teams that are 500 or better, and that includes 3 wins against the Magic without their 2 best players, or 1 game with Franz, 2 games without him. 1-6 against the top 8 overall teams in the NBA. So I don't know how to feel about that when against Oklahoma City, again, they look like the better team for 3 quarters. Just a week ago, Mikal Bridges, I would say, more than held up against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was borderline winning that one-on-one matchup, which would be stunning for him. I mean, that's arguably the best player in the NBA right now, and Mikal was locking him up. OG Anunoby was locking up Jalen Williams. Karl Anthony Towns was like limited touches, but he was effective when he had the ball. Jalen Brunson was finding his spots. Josh Hart was awesome. And you fast forward a week, but not even a week, you fast forward to that fourth quarter of that first game where Oklahoma City outscored them by 20, like all these cracks started to appear, and the Knicks had a week to fix it. I think you and I were coming into it saying, all right, they're going to figure this out. They're going to figure a way to plug these holes. And instead, like, I have 8 bullet points I want to go throughout this one. There were just a myriad of issues, a lot of them centered around the wings, but not entirely, like late getting into their offense. Couldn't figure out Isaiah Hartenstein screening, constant miscommunication defensively, 0 answer at all when the Thunder went 5 out, even though SGA was off the floor, couldn't handle the blitz that just stymied them in the fourth quarter of that first game. And just all this stuff that should have been cleaned up that just wasn't. And on top of that, like, the effort was just inexcusably poor. And this team outside of Josh Hart and maybe Towns looked borderline disinterested. And I don't know how to interpret it that they come back and beat the Bucks, but just given the fact that they've struggled all year in like really substantial ways against the best of the best, my biggest takeaway from this weekend was that the Knicks are a good team, but not quite a championship team yet. And I don't think anything they did against Milwaukee changed that for me.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe more willing to write off the OKC game at this point. I mean, if you had asked me this on Friday, I would have been like, no, that was really bad, because it was. That said, I mean, I think that it's important to consider, OKC is mostly the same team that's been together for the last few years. They just added Hartenstein this year, who was like a real fit, like a glove kind of fit. Obviously, they're still without Holmgren too, so like that'll, they'll have to figure that whole situation out when he comes back, but I'm sure it won't be hard because he's just really talented and very skilled and everything else. Like he's going to fit in like a glove too. So they've kind of got this core that was like ready to rock and roll right from day one. And they've shown, like, I mean, all apologies to the Cavs, if there happens to be a Cavs fan listening, they've been really great. I think OKC is the best team in basketball right now. I think they have the most varied looks that they could throw at any team. I think they've thrown those looks at the Knicks. I think the Knicks just got, as usual, I mean, this is something that vexes them often, but, a team that can throw zone at them is going to have a good chance of vexing the Knicks. A team that can, like, on the fly switch between, like, zone and man is just going to fry them. And we saw that on Friday. And, like, that's just something the Knicks just don't have the capacity to deal with yet, apparently. That said, like, it's still early on. I mean, I guess we are sort of right in the throes of what was the enormous January last year. So it's kind of hard to be like, oh, they're still figuring it out, because like this time last year, they just traded for OG Anunoby and they were absolutely crushing. Yeah. But again, with a largely similar core to what they had the year before, just adding OG Anunoby into it. I think they're still figuring things out. And that, I don't use that to excuse like Mikal Bridges, for example, who I think is just really, I don't know what happens to him. Like where game to game, it's like sometimes he's an absolute killer. In other games, he's just looks like he doesn't even want to be on the basketball court lately. But outside of that, like I think the game against Milwaukee just showed us the reason I'm more optimistic this week than coming out of this weekend than I was coming out of last weekend, and certainly after last Monday, is that the way that the Knicks responded was better for me. Like, I don't think that they're necessarily a championship team this season. I think they're probably still a move away. They still need to fine tune this roster a little bit, finagle whatever they can, get over that second apron next year. When they're legally allowed to by the CBA, make whatever final moves they have to try to like build this championship team. But at this point, I think it's just like getting this team to the point where maybe if they shock us, they could be a title contender, but really just starting to creep into that upper echelon. And, I think maybe we got a little too big for our britches at certain points earlier this year, thinking like, oh, this might be a title team. Like, but the reality is, there's probably a very real chance they're not. Maybe they make an ECF run or something, and that would be progress, certainly. But I think the main thing is just they went up against one of the best teams in the NBA. They responded well in the next game, and that's very different from what they did last weekend, which was they didn't even look like a good team last weekend, because they responded from losing to OKC, turning around immediately, losing to Chicago, turning around immediately, losing to the extremely depleted Magic, and looking just as dead as they did in that OKC game, in that Orlando game when they had no excuse to. I think this game they came in, they punched Milwaukee in the mouth, and they came out with a win. I think that's why I'm feeling a little more optimistic today than I was earlier in the week.
Yeah, all great points. And again, I think we're probably closer than we thought when we were texting coming into this, because that is what everything you said is largely my opinion on it too. And my pessimism is more for this season and less so saying, all right, this experiment is doomed. And a lot of the pessimism I saw coming out of that game rightfully is in the past when this team had bad losses, you'd say, all right, but they still have whatever it was, 11 first round picks to work with. They have Emmanuel Quickley to trade, potentially have RJ Barrett to trade. As we found out, Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle were able to be turned into a significant asset, maybe one of the top 20 players in the NBA, in Karl Anthony Towns. They no longer have that flexibility. So these losses feel a little bit more final, but to your point, we'll have some increased flexibility next offseason. I think time is a crucial factor, and a lot of people have highlighted, like, it took the Celtics 7 years to figure it out. It's taken the Thunder, I mean, they're very young, but maybe 2 or 3 years to get to this current iteration. The Cavs are in their third year, and they're just kind of finally rounding that corner and rounding into form. And the Knicks are not super young. These guys are smack dab in the middle of their prime. So there is inherently some urgency there in that sense. But to your point, I think offensively, this is very clearly a team with an incredible amount of firepower, but an inability to consistently unlock all of it simultaneously and pull all the triggers simultaneously. And some of that is on Jalen Brunson, who overall offensively, like, one of his best games of the season, one of his best games as a Knick against the Milwaukee Bucks. But there are certainly plays where it was very obvious Oklahoma City said, hey, like, Jalen Brunson is shooting. We don't really need to do anything else here. And to me, like, I think what's worth figuring out over the course of the season, is that just because they knew Jalen wasn't going to pass the ball and was going to attack the mismatch, or was it more so that they just did not respect the Knicks shooters? And that was so clear that the Thunder, like, especially with how they played Karl Anthony Towns, and the Knicks made it more difficult by crowding Towns and just not having optimal spacing. And that stuff that can be solved with time. For me, the bigger question is, like, is OG Anunoby like a good enough shooter that he should be respected all the time? I think we both think so based on a sample size. Same with Mikal Bridges. They haven't been shooting like it lately, and it makes the Knicks a much easier team to defend.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. The monster matchup of the divisional round is Bills-Ravens. Each team dominated their wildcard game, so the line is probably going to see some movement over the next week. Right now, FanDuel has the Bills favored at home by 1.5. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
A win streak ended in Cleveland on Sunday night, but it wasn't the Pacers.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast.
What has stood out to me so much about this Pacers run, and something I feel like I've said a lot after wins they've had against good teams, is something to this effect. I say everybody did something. Everybody contributed something. And there were a lot of games early in the season where it didn't quite feel that way, right? Their, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th best guys in games would just kind of be 1 for 4 and not do a whole lot. And they've had a lot more games recently where it speaks to their depth and the quantity of talent on their team that they've had these kind of games. Tonight was a little different, though. It wasn't just that everybody did something. Here's what I mean by it in this specific game. If you're just sitting at your house and you didn't know Pacers Cavs was happening and you looked it up on your phone, you said, oh, it's happening. No matter what time you happened to turn the game on for the first time, the start of the game, the late in the first quarter, early in the third, whenever you did it, a different Pacers player was the one who was playing the best at that specific moment. That's what was so interesting about this game. No one player really dominated the entire game. And I think that is fascinating as a way to win against a really good team. For example, the Pacers' halftime scoring leader was Miles Turner, who had 10 of his 15 points in the first half. As the Pacers were going into this probably a little too perimeter-focused style in the first half, they weren't shooting very well. They needed something to score. And that something was Miles Turner, who was 3 for 7, but got to the foul line and was the first Pacers player who really felt like had any sort of success ducking in and finding success down low. 6 points in the first quarter as the Pacers, after starting down 10-0, surged back into the game and eventually took the lead, right? If you watched just the first quarter, turned it on early, you'd say, wow, Miles Turner has been, the Pacers' best player. If you flipped it on in the second quarter, you'd have been very impressed by the Pacers bench that started the quarter strong, and the starters came in and stunk it up to close the frame as the Pacers were down huge at halftime. But you might have said, wow, Thomas Bryant's playing really well. 4 rebounds. He had a 3. That was awesome. Or Miles Turner or Andrew Nembhard. Look at him go. He hasn't missed a shot yet. Or even Tyrese Haliburton, who we will talk much about after he got hurt in this game. Wow, 3 assists for Haliburton. He's really keeping the ball moving for this Pacers team, who cleaned up some turnovers. That was the worst quarter for the Pacers of the game. But lots of guys at various moments were the best player. You might have flipped it on in the third quarter and thought, oh my gosh, Ben Mathurin must be having an awesome game. And I thought this was the most important moment of the game, so I'm going to diverge from my narrative here of every player having a key moment. The Pacers were down big at halftime, and something I put in my notes was that Pacers need a guard to step up, right? The way the Cavs are, with their front court dominance of Allen and Mobley, and how much trouble that was giving Turner and Siakam. I'm not saying Turner and Siakam played bad, but it was clear that the Pacers were settling for too many jumpers and were struggling in the paint. It might lose the front court battle. They needed a guard to be better, and Halliburton and Mathurin and Nembhard and McConnell were like fine at best, I guess, in the first half, but not good enough. And I thought if the Pacers get one guard who can get to the rim or make some threes, one or the other is enough. Just someone who can be a threat on the perimeter, that would unlock a lot for their offense. Someone they can play through, be confident in. Early third quarter, the only good stretch he had of the whole game, but it was so needed. Ben Mathurin's third quarter was huge. 7 points in the first, I believe, 4 minutes of that quarter. Important 3, 2 drives to the basket that created something. He finishes that frame with 10 points. Had he made it both of his free throw attempts, of which he missed both, he would have had obviously more. Plus 20 in just the third quarter was Ben Mathurin. But then Obi Toppin comes in off the bench late in the third quarter without Mathurin on the floor, and he has 10 points in the last 5 minutes of the quarter on 4 for 5 shooting. You might have thought Obi Toppin was the best player on the floor. If you flipped the game on at that time, you might have thought TJ McConnell was late in the third or early in the fourth quarter when he was really setting the Pacers bench in motion. But early in the fourth, you probably thought it was Jarris Walker, who was rebounding like a beast, who made his shots. He had 5 rebounds in the fourth quarter. Jarris Walker, a Pacers high, plus 11. In that quarter, you might have thought it was Siakam because the Pacers were trying to run everything through him in that quarter. He took 6 shots in that frame. And then at the very final minutes of the game, you might have thought it was Andrew Nembhard, who was awesome in the fourth quarter, got a ton of praise from TJ McConnell in a very TJ McConnell way on the FanDuel Sports Indiana broadcast. 11 fourth quarter points for Andrew Nembhard, 4 for 5, banked in a 3 that was the dagger, 2 assists. He closed it out as the solo point guard with Halliburton out with an injury. Absolutely massive. Every single player did something. Ben Shepherd never had a stretch where you thought, man, he's the best player on the floor. But he was still rock solid all night. He started the second half. Ben Shepherd finishes 2 for 4, made a 3, was plus 11 with 5 points. Every Pacers player contributed. That's happened a lot for them in wins, though. What happened in this game was every single stretch of the game, they needed something else to go their way to be better than the Cavs. And someone else, every single time, stepped up to lead the charge. And that was fascinating. I have never seen them play like that. And I thought it was really cool how they kept evolving throughout the game. It says a lot about their trust in each other as a unit and kind of their malleability right now, right? That, don't get me wrong, they have an identity. They play high-paced. Halliburton sets it all in motion. They can go to Siakam when they need to. When everybody's humming and they're playing random and the ball's moving, they look great. They look at their best when they get to that 30 to 35 assist range. They got to 30 against a pretty good Cavs defense. They've been dominating the possession battle this year. That's why they're 6-0 in 2025. They were pretty good in those areas tonight, winning both the turnover and offensive rebounding battle. I can go on and on about all the stuff that's made them better since they were 10 and 15, and I will talk about many of those things in the second segment, including the defense. And all that really mattered for them winning. But the way that they were able to change their focus, right? Early, they were trying to get their threes up because the paint's going to be tough with Mobley and Allen. And that wasn't really working. So they changed how they were going into their offense. And early, their defense wasn't quite working, and they needed more size because the Cavs were pretty big. Okay, let's play some more Jarris Walker in the second half and use some more size units. And yes, Halliburton getting hurt changed the makeup of their defense too, but they did a good job adjusting in that way. Like, Jarris Walker never is the guy who leads the team in minutes off the bench. Technically, if you look at the box score, you'll think that's Ben Shepherd, but he got more minutes because he started the second half, right? Lots of stuff had to be tweaked and changed and thought about and revisited. And every single time the Pacers did that, someone else had to step up to make it work. And that happened all night. It was very impressive. And that's how they got to win, among many other things that went their way. Now, some of their key style things really remained. I just ran through these, but 92 to 83 in shots, despite even free throws. 9 more shots for the Pacers was important because the Cavs hung around, right? They were actually accurate from the foul line, unlike the Pacers. They made 11 threes just like the Pacers, right? The 2-point battle was key, and that's a smaller variance game, so you need all that extra volume. 9 extra shots for the Pacers, and they win by 15. They needed every single one of those extra chances that they got. 3 fewer turnovers for the Pacers and 3 extra offensive rebounds. Both played a big factor in that. Siakam and Turner with 6 of those 9 offensive rebounds and 3 of those turnovers for Nembhard, only 7 for the rest of the team. While on the Cavs, 4 for Garland and 3 for Mitchell. That's already 7 of the Cavs things. So that style change that we've seen from – change is the wrong word. That style swap we've seen from the Pacers was a big part of things. They really have lasered in their focus in that way this calendar year, and that was important. And then something else I've been talking about, they got more threes up. It doesn't look like it, only 35. That's below average. That's good against the Cavs, especially early. Man, were they letting it fly in the first quarter. They were 3 for 18 at halftime in this game. I think 11 threes in the first quarter. So their plan early was what I thought it would take to beat the Cavs. Get up a bunch of threes, play the way the Pacers have, where you get into the paint, spray out from there. But they weren't able to get into the paint. They were just kind of tossing around the perimeter, low-quality threes, and they still got enough up to play their style and play their game, but adjusted as needed. That malleability within their own style was very impressive. What a statement for the Pacers, who had won 5 in a row. And don't get me wrong, you never apologize for a 5-game win streak in the NBA. Golden State's 500, they're good. Like, it's a respectable win. Chicago's fine, but below 500. Brooklyn stinks. Phoenix is exactly 500. The Heat had Jimmy Butler, but they're clearly in some sort of twist. Like, those are fun. All those wins are fine. I mean, the Nets wins not, but are fine quality wins, but not great wins. This is a statement great win. This is the best team they beat this year, and they beat the Celtics twice, right? That was the best win for the Pacers this season. That was the second loss in Cleveland for the Cavs this whole season, this entire season. The only other one being, I think, Atlanta around Thanksgiving. They had won 12 in a row. They were rolling. Their last game before this against Toronto, they didn't look very good. But before that, they were absolutely rolling. They looked great. They looked like one of the best teams in the league. And the Pacers beat them. And they beat them pretty handily in the second half of this game.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Nuggets can't keep getting away with it, except they do.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast.
This is exactly what was supposed to happen. I was talking to my brother before this game about, hey, how are they going to do? Are they going to lose this game? Or because Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving obviously don't play for the Mavericks. And yet you look at the lineups that the Mavericks can throw out there. It's extremely functional. These guys are very talented. These guys are very good. And my brother was like, yeah, they'll probably win by 12. And they win by 11, despite the fact that they had the massive swings of they look horrible or they look like the best team on earth. It averages about out to a 12-point win.
Yeah, in the win, Nikola Jokic, 19 points on 6 of 13 shooting, 18 rebounds, 9 assists. He was a -2.
Call that a C- D+ game for Nikola.
Yeah. Jamal Murray, 17 points on 18 shots, but we'll come back to him in a minute, -5. Russell Westbrook with 21 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks, and a -3. Peyton Watson, 10 points, 6 rebounds, and a +30.
Ugh.
Aaron Gordon returns with 13 points on 6 of 7 shooting, 6 boards, 2 assists, and a +23.
Love it.
And DeAndre Jordan, 6 points, 3 of 3 from the field, 5 rebounds in 9 minutes, Ryan.
Yep.
5 rebounds in 9 minutes and a +13. The Nuggets win a game in which all of the Nuggets starters, except for Michael Porter Jr., who was 5 of 13 from the field, were in the negative. Thanks to the bench contributions and a great fourth quarter performance with the bench from Jamal Murray. You mentioned you're just like, this is just how the NBA works. And you're right in that this is where I always kind of battle with, I battle with fans about a lot of stuff, but one of the things that I battle a lot with is, if you pay attention every night to all the teams, you're just like, that's weird. Like, that game's weird. That, like, logically they should just win by 20. This team doesn't have Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving. Why wouldn't they just smash? That's weird. Then it happens again, and you're like, that's odd. The Hawks lost to the Wizards. That's weird. And over and over and over again. And then finally you start to, I reached a point where I was just like, don't assume things. Like, don't assume the logical outcome of these things. Don't assume it in trade talks. Don't assume it in player behavior. Don't assume it in game flow. Don't assume it in matchups. it's sports. Sports are messy. And the Nuggets did not have it for a matinee afternoon game versus Dallas until they did. And the comeback was really pretty great because I thought they were pretty well screwed going into that fourth quarter. But they managed to get the game back within range. The bench did the work. Jamal Murray was absolutely terrific in the fourth quarter, Ryan. Like, Jamal Murray was terrific in the fourth quarter. He made a really great contestant transition and then some huge buckets. And it's like, well, it was great. 3 of 8, 8 points on 8 shots. I'm like, yeah, I get it. But like, he was plus 16. Jamal in the bench unit is what sparked the run. And then the starters carried it over. So a weird game, but a good result for Denver. I don't know. This one, I don't even know if it counts as a bad win, right?
No, I don't think so either, because anytime that you play a like contender against you, despite the fact that they may be missing their stars, anytime you can win that game on the road, I called this a must win, and they won. And it's the process of which, like,
I'm sorry, wait. You called this a must win?
I think if you're gonna try, okay. When Denver split at home, if you are looking to get the tiebreaker with the Mavericks, this is the correct time to take advantage of that when you've got 2 games against the Mavericks and you luck into the time where Luka Doncic is out and Kyrie Irving is out. That was my logic behind it. Denver's getting back their reinforcements. I understand how you, the process king, are going to roll your eyes at that one. But this is one of those where, and I made sure to mention this earlier, where if you are serious, good Lord, how many times am I going to get a text message during a freaking podcast? It's from my mother.
Hey, Mom!
Basically, like,
Is she also telling you that this is not a must-win game? Because
she's telling me I need to be over on Thursday in the middle of the third day in 4 nights on my one off day from going to the Nuggets arena, basically. I love you, Mom. But no, like, okay, so the process here for Denver is that obviously you get your guys back, you start rolling, and anytime, for whatever reason, it feels like anytime you throw in a wrinkle into what Denver's plan is or how they've gotten into their groove, they seem to self-combust. And I don't understand why. I don't understand, because Aaron Gordon was great today. Like, they were really good. Like, the bench was really good today. I don't understand how the starters, given that they've been playing the same unit for much of the same time, could look so horrible together. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's I think it's context, right? It's an early start on the road. That's a tough spot. And if you want to be like, they're without Luka and Kyrie, they should, like, there are no excuses. You're absolutely right. If they had lost, oh man, would we be killing them? Killing them for this game. I do think that it's a weird spot, and that I've seen it so much. It's like, it does happen. It shouldn't, but it does happen, and it happens to pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Like, it happens to pretty much like, there's so few teams that just never have letdown games. I don't think I've ever seen one. You know, the Celtics kind of were that team, and then in March they lost twice to the Hawks in a week. And
at this point, the only team is OKC.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I think I think it's strange, but not inconceivable. And I do think the Mavericks, like, we'll talk about them later. Like, everyone's got a lot of respect for this Mavericks team. They've built a really good infrastructure. They defend really well. They have smart guards. They have really great rollers. They waste very few possessions. Jaden Hardy, I think, has really tightened his game. Spencer Dinwiddie is a really good guard, just to kind of lead you. Like, Dallas was kind of like, oh boy, these ISOs late for Dinwiddie. And I'm kind of like, there's nothing else you can really go to here, guys. Like, you can't give the ball to Klay Thompson and be like, go get us a bucket. You know, you can't do that at this point in his career. So a whole lot of stuff. But in general, you know, look, I think if nothing else, I think there's some positives, which is like, hey, what if Aaron and the bench, what if Aaron and DJ could actually anchor some things because Aaron's shooting some well from 3? Hey, what if, you know, if you're getting these better minutes from DeAndre, and these units are only losing by 4 to 5 on a nightly basis, and sometimes winning their minutes, it does kind of change the dynamic, and that increases your margin for error, because that means that the starters can have 2 really bad, awful, horrific stretches, and then be like, oh, we're in this game, let's go close it. And they closed it, which is
They did.
their identity.
I mean, and look, you got the win. You'd go through, I think, a topsy-turvy process, but ultimately, like I said, it was a result that you really value. 33-12 fourth quarter, 41-29 second quarter to get them back into it. They won those quarters by a combined, what is that, 33? Like, holy cow, man. It's really hard to win games by that many points, or to win quarters by that many points. So it is a very good process, part of it for Denver, to get them back into the flow and not really give up on a game. That if anything, I think they should get some credit for, to not kind of let go of the rope and know that they could get back into it and continue to chip away.